Hey guys, my name is Joseph Potter, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about Heroku. Heroku is a cloud platform that lets companies build, deliver, monitor, and scale apps. They claim to be the fastest way to go from idea to URL, bypassing all those infrastructure headaches. So basically, Heroku is a way for you to take your code and deploy it to the web in the most easy and efficient way possible without needing to do much in terms of configuration. So before we get deep into this tutorial, let's go over what we're going to do. What we started with was talking a little bit about what Heroku is. Next, we're going to cover the prerequisites to start developing with Heroku. Once we've done that, I'm going to show you an API and a web application that I have running locally on my machine. From there, I'm going to show you how to deploy the API, and then I'll show you how to deploy the web application, and we'll wrap up by showing them both running in production. So let's start by covering the prerequisites. So there are three prerequisites to using Heroku and two that are absolutely necessary. The first one is you need to create a login with Heroku. So you can do that here at signup.heroku.com. And you just fill out this form, and creating an account is very easy. After that, you need to download the Heroku CLI. So if you come to this website right here, where you can just Google Heroku CLI, and this will be one of the first hits, you can either click here to download and install, or you can come and click Mac OS and Windows. And I think if you click here, it's going to take you down here anyway. So you can just download for Mac, Windows, or Linux. Once you have that set up, you are ready to go with Heroku, but there's one more thing that you can do to be able to do more stuff in Heroku, which is you can come to your account settings page and click on billing, and you can add a credit card. Once you've added a credit card to your account, it allows you to put more add-ons on your Heroku apps, and so it just allows you to do more with Heroku. And a lot of the stuff is free anyway, but they just require a credit card for you to do it. So once you've done that, you can start deploying with Heroku. So now let's take a look at the two components that I have running locally here on my machine. The first is an API, and let me make sure that I still have that running. Oh, it looks like I do not. So let's run that really fast. So now we have this API running on my machine, and if we refresh it, we can see that we get data back. So what this is just a Python script that is calling a MongoDB database and pulling back a list of comments. And then over here, we have our web application running, which pulls that list of comments from the API, and you can add more comments to it. So if we add new comment, that will make a request out to the server and pull back the whole list and add the new comment to it. And so now I'll show you what the API looks like in the code. So here in init.py, this is the script that basically sets up the application and gets connected to the MongoDB database. And then we've got resources.py, which exposes our endpoints for the database. So it exposes a get and a post to the list of comments, so you can add a new comment and you can get them. And those are what we're using in our web application. And then let's look briefly at the code over here. All this is doing is we have a div here called comments, and when the page initially loads, it calls this refresh data, and the refresh data goes out to the API, gets all of the comments, and puts them into that div so that we can read them. And then anytime you add a comment, it posts it and then does the same thing by calling refresh data. And so that's basically how they're working locally, and I'm going to show you how to deploy them to Heroku, starting with the API. So there are two things you're going to need to deploy a Python application to Heroku. The first is a requirements file. This specifies all the packages that Python needs to use to create your application. So for example, we're deploying it with Flask and gunicorn, which is right there, and all of these other packages are important packages that we're using to do the deployment. And it's a simple pip command to create this requirements file, which you can easily find by Googling pip requirements.txt. And that basically allows you to put all of your required packages into your environment on Heroku. The other file that you need is the proc file, which specifies the process and the commands that need to be run when you start that process. So in our case, we're starting a web process, and when that web process starts, we want to run this command, gunicorn, and then our module. So gunicorn is our web server that we're using, and Flask REST service is the name of our module that contains the app. So once you have those two files in place, deployment should be fairly simple. So let's go run that deployment. All right, so first thing we got to do is stop the Heroku API. And now we need to initialize a Git repository. So let me make sure I have my old one deleted really fast. Yeah, so I have that deleted. So we'll do git init. And so we just made an empty repository, then git add and git commit. So Heroku uses Git to do all of its work. So we have to make a Git repository that has all of our code and then deploy that through Git to Heroku. So now that we've got our repository made with all of our code in it, we're ready to deploy. So to deploy, the first thing you got to do is log in. I've already done that, but you would run this command, Heroku login. Then it would ask you for your credentials here in the command line, and then you're ready to go. So once you've logged in, you do Heroku create. And so that will create our app. So that runs pretty fast. We now have our app at Heroku.com. And now since our application is using MongoDB, we need to go add that add-on at Heroku. So if we come to our apps and refresh the page, we will see that new application here. Heroku just gave it a name. And what we need to do is configure our add-ons for that app. So let's find our MongoDB add-on. So it's this one, mlab MongoDB, and we'll provision that. It'll take a few seconds, and then our MongoDB database will be provisioned and ready to use locally. So the other thing we need to do is get the URI so that we can set an environment variable mongo_URL to pass to our Python application. Because as you can see here, oh, sorry, wrong application. As you can see in init.py, our API is calling mongo_URL as an environment variable, and it's using that to connect to the database. So we need to put that URL in our environment. So if we come over here, we can go get that URI with this command. And so that's the URL. And then we can set it with this command. And so that should set everything up for us. Now that that's set up, we're ready to push to master. And that's once you push to Heroku master, that's when your application will actually be deployed. So right there, that's going to take a few seconds to run because it's deploying our application. And it should any second now be finishing. It's just downloading and installing all of our Python packages. So there, it just successfully installed them. And so now it found our web process and is launching. And so now that's deployed. So now let's make sure, so Heroku PS is a way to look at all of your processes that you have running on a Heroku instance. So we can see that we have one web process running that used that command to run. So we should now have the API working. So let's open that up with Heroku open. And so that'll open it up. We can see we have status OK, which is showing everything we need. So now that we have that deployed, let's go deploy our web application. So first thing we need is this URL that it deployed to. So we come here to index.html. We're going to change this URL right here. So now it's calling the correct URL, and we'll save that. So now once that's saved, we should be ready to go. So now let me just explain briefly how this works. So Heroku won't directly deploy static web pages. you have to have some kind of backend service. So what I have running is a little index script, or a PHP script, that all it does is serve index.html, and all it does is serve index.html. So in essence, we have a static web page running here. We just need this little PHP file to run it on Heroku. And what Heroku does is when it detects that it's a PHP application, it'll automatically go to index.php. So we don't need a proc file here to tell it commands to do its startup, because it'll automatically run index.php. So let's deploy that as well. And to do that, we need to initialize an empty Git repository. So let's do that. So git init, and then git add, and git commit. So now we have our repository created. We're ready to create the Heroku app, as we did before. So Heroku create. That creates us an app. And now we just got to push that to master, and it should deploy our application for us. And that's deploying. So we've now got that deployed. We can do Heroku PS to make sure that that's working. And we do have the web server running. And so let's open that. All right, so that worked. Now let's make sure that adding comments works. So comment, and we add a comment, and that is able to communicate with the API. So here, if we go back to this guy and go /comments, hit enter, that's able to go grab that comment as well. So we now have these two, the API and the web application working, and that's how you could do it on Heroku. Now, just to end here, these are the sources that I used in making this. I'll paste these into the comment section of the video. If you want the code for the API, I adapted it from this right here, this second source, and so you can get that from the comments. Well, thanks guys for watching. Have a great day.